Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. My name is David Baer. Today, we're going to dive into an area I don't know a heck of a lot about, and I hope by the end of this half hour, I'm going to know a lot more about it. And it's the world of business to business e-commerce. To help us in this discussion, we're going to chat with Mike Mayer, who's joining me having built a business, an agency supporting companies in this space, the world of selling from one business to another. But he has a background working in electrical wholesale and in the world of industrial and scientific supply. Stuff that I don't even really know what it is. I can sort of guess and imagine, and so hopefully we'll dive into some of that as well. But in recent years, he has built and is now the CEO of a company called Main Event Digital, which is an agency supporting digital marketing and e-commerce for B2B businesses. Mike, welcome.
David, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Hey,
Appreciate it.
so yeah, absolutely. I'm thrilled to have you because you're going to help decipher some of this stuff around B2B that
Sure.
I know basic stuff. And it's because
Sure.
I've worked mostly with businesses that serve consumers either in a service or retail setting. And I remember a couple of years ago, I had a large industrial company that we were doing some consulting with come to us and say, "Hey, we want to." We supply tires for airplanes was one of the big areas for this company,
Okay.
and we want to create an app to help our supply chain have easier access to us. And I knew that I was out of my depths there, right? And I worked through some of the process, and ultimately we helped them decide that it didn't make any sense to move forward with this because of the habits of the way that people interact with them and their business and all of those sorts of things. So this was the only glimpse that I've had into the world that you live in. And frankly, I don't know if I gave them good or bad advice, by the end, but I felt like it was the right path based on my knowledge base. Perhaps at the end of this conversation, I'll realize I may have made some errors in judgment, or perhaps I did well. But I want to sort of get a sense from you of what this world is all about, the B2B world, and how digital and specifically e-commerce, which you've been in charge of at several of the companies that you've been at, what role that plays.
Sure. Yeah. Um, Good question. So, B2C versus B2B, business to business versus business to consumer. In business to consumer, folks are selling directly to consumers. It's usually things that you use every day. Business to business, I'm helping companies sell, just like you mentioned, tires to an airline, or I'm selling beakers to a lab, or pipe and wire to an electrical contractor. So it's that transaction happening before things are getting, utilized in services that a consumer is taking advantage of, or in products that a consumer is taking advantage of. So, to give you a little more color, the last before I started my agency, which was about 2.5 years ago, happened to start it right when COVID started in March of 2020, which was amazing timing. And the previous 13 years, I had spent my time working at three different distributors. One was Thermo Fisher Scientific, and they are a like $28 billion scientific and industrial supply manufacturer and distributor. So in that role, we I was running e-commerce and digital marketing for two of their three distributors, and we were selling mainly to institutional customers, schools, government, labs, and about 100,000 different scientific and industrial products. Anything from test tubes and chemicals and beakers to um, carts and bins and containers. I mean, just a very wide variety of products. From there, I went and did pretty much the same thing where I was starting e-commerce and starting digital marketing for these businesses and running them. And I did that for two electrical distributors, also both billion-dollar businesses, mainly focused on selling products to electrical contractors. So these are the guys that are doing commercial build outs, doing residential build outs, doing the rough in work, behind the walls and the finish work. So we're selling things like pipe and wire, switches, outlets, lighting, fans, generators, the whole gamut. And both of those companies had about 200,000 SKUs on their
Mm,
websites. So, we were building these sites, getting a crazy amount of product content put together so that on-site search could work, launching full featured B2B sites. And full featured is means you take a B2C website and then you add a bunch of additional features that the B2B customer needs to get their job done. And examples would be everyone's paying a different price.
mm.
So depending on, you as, let's say, an electrical contractor, your size, your purchasing power, and your order history, you might be getting, 20% off, 30% off. It could greatly vary. Then,
So
so
it's account-based pricing is what you're
yeah,
describing. So as somebody logs in, the platform is going to know, okay, this person is in this category of pricing, and this is
exactly,
what we show to them. That's crazy.
exactly.
Okay.
So that's one key feature. Another is net 30 terms. So rarely does your B2B customer pay with a credit card. They're going to have credit terms with your business and then pay, 30 days later. So giving them the ability to pay on account versus paying upfront.
Hmm.
Giving them other features like the ability to use tax exemption certificates so that they don't have to pay tax on certain purchases. Um, Giving them quick order pads. Usually these customers are not just ordering one item, they're ordering an entire list. So having them go through your website and run a search and find a product and add it to cart is tedious. So we build out functionality where they can copy and paste from a spreadsheet or upload a CSV or an XLS, and it will build a cart for them kind of instantaneously.
So, I'm thinking, I'm looking back at some of the places you worked prior to your leadership roles and see that you started your career at a point when a lot of this transition to online transaction was really just getting going. I mean, if
Right.
we think back around, something we're all familiar with, Amazon, which started in the early '90s, and the amount of new stuff that they had introduced to the general public in terms of concepts. Well, you
Sure.
worked through similar things, I'm assuming, in the B2B space
Mhm.
as you've seen things develop. There was a period of transition that obviously we're past now, where suppliers were moving from catalogs and 800 numbers and whatever else they did in terms of fulfilling their B2B client orders and supporting the relationship into what we have now. What I'm assuming we're past that transition phase. Is that an accurate assessment, or is there still like a group of businesses kicking and screaming going into the online world?
No, most of the businesses are kicking and screaming.
Okay.
The leading distributors have built platforms. Their customer base kicking and screaming to use those platforms. So it compared to B2C, the B2B has more revenue transacted than B2C and way more opportunity and such a long way to go.
Hmm.
Most of your B2B buyers, and it depends on what type of buyer. So when just looking at my past, when I look at, let's say, the labs, the scientists, those guys were early adopters. They're well educated, they're sitting in front of a computer. So getting them to transact online was not a heavy lift. Now, fast forward to the next two roles when I was selling to electrical contractors. This could be your local electrician that is out in his truck all day coming to your house to, install LED lighting. Much, much harder lift to get them to stop coming into our branches, to stop calling us, to stop emailing us purchase orders, and to go on a mobile app or go on a website and transact. So there's still a ton of opportunity. And the key to getting these folks to move online all comes down to user experience and incentive. So you need to have a world-class user experience and then motivate these guys, give them a reason. Sometimes it's rebates, sometimes it's discounts, sometimes it's a rewards catalog. Sometimes it just requires some training. And for someone within your business to pick up the phone and tell the customer, hey, we have a website, you can stop calling us, or you can stop coming into our store and sitting on a stool for an hour every morning waiting for your material, when you can just go on the app and place an order for delivery or for like a will call pickup. So often it's communication and education. And most importantly, I didn't mention, is getting the team, the employees of the distributor, on board and rowing in the same direction. Because if they're not motivated to support the customer base will continue business as usual. And what I see most often is these order writers, these inside salesmen, the outside salesmen, they're getting paid to write orders. They're getting paid when they are handling the transaction, not when they're encouraging their customer to use an electronic channel. So there's usually a disconnect, within your own home that you need to fix first before you start motivating the customers.
So you bring up a couple of really interesting points here, and this is what I was alluding to earlier when I was saying about that tire company. We were dissuading them from using the app approach, at least at this point in time, because it required a massive change in the behavior of their customer. And you've described that with regard to the example you just gave. But on top of that, you've just added that you have to have an influence on the behavior and the general culture within your organization in order for any shift like this to be effective.
Exactly.
So I'm curious. You're coming at this as an agency now, supporting businesses either through a transition or an enhancement of what they've built, and then need to figure out how do we actually, get more people utilizing it.
Right.
How do you? What is the role that you play in all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always start with why we want to do this. Why do you want to have people using electronic channels? Well, that is a metric that I've been tracking now for over 15 years at various distributors. And what we see is when people use electronic channels, they end up spending 11% more than if they weren't using electronic channels. And that's not to say they have to order online, but at least have an account and use the website to get their pricing, to see inventory status, to look at product content, to really see your full catalog. That's the key. So it's that communication to the leadership of the distributor saying, we can increase your sales by 11% if we get people using your website. Then we build a strategy internally first of how are we going to build the right system? What are the bells and whistles? So that usually comes in the form of a roadmap of here are all the features we need. Then there is a launch plan of how to get the employees, as I mentioned, rowing in the same direction. That is typically with webinars, FAQs that they can post up in their offices or cube walls. And it's communication from the C-level saying, this is important. We need you to support it. And most importantly, compensation changes so that the internal team is motivated to move people online. As you can imagine, not only is there this 11% bump, but there's also a savings when a customer is not wasting a salesman's time, where a salesman is just sitting there either copying and pasting from an emailed PO or on the phone, just typing in what this customer is saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I've measured the average cost to write an order for a salesman. And honestly, this research I did was about 10 years ago, so I'm sure it's increased. But at 10 years ago, it was about $25 to write an average order. And you can imagine, to write an order on a website, it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
It's a fixed cost to have this website. And maybe you're paying a little bit for bandwidth, but it's nominal. So
so you've talked about, you said 11%, you talked about the cost of having a salesperson write an order, and those are all very logical arguments. And one of the things that, we talk about on the show quite a bit is the use of the human nature, which is to buy on emotion and then subsequently rationalize the purchase on logic. But I wonder how different that is in the scenarios that you're dealing with. How much of the decision making is really all based on logical argument?
It's very logical. I mean, typically the purchasing process goes like this. Let's just go with the example of a contractor shows up at your house and you have a project for them. They are going to sit there and write down a bill of materials, everything they're going to need to get that project done. So it's really, they're just a middleman ordering for you the materials they need to complete your job. So they're taking that list. They are doing one of many things. The typical process is they grab a piece of cardboard from a job site and they chicken scratch what they need. And then they go run over to the local supply house and sit there for an hour while the counter guy goes and pulls all the products. That is probably not the most effective way. Some more mature guys that are out in the field will have some field service management software where they can start entering or selecting the items they need, where they can then take that and build a purchase order and send that into for quotes or send that directly to a supplier to fill. That also may not be the most effective way because it's coming potentially in an email. The most elegant way is when there is an integration, and that's usually through a punch out or a hosted catalog or an EDI transaction where it's all just happening and transacting, where basically this guy in the field enters his items, hits submit, and that creates an order in the distributor system.
Mm-hmm.
And the material's getting delivered the next morning, or it's available for a will call pickup.
What does ADI stand for?
Oh, EDI.
Oh, EDI. Okay. Yeah. And what does that stand for?
That is a electronic data interchange. So okay. that is a format that companies use to send transactions. It's just basically a method of communication that businesses use to transact or communicate.
Okay, got it.
I may have gone into a little too much detail here, so I apologize.
My job is to decipher anything that I don't understand, because I imagine that there are listeners out there who may not know those terms either. So, I just have to get the letters correct. So I want to understand a little bit about the shift in perspective that you've experienced, going from somebody who was in the role of running e-commerce, being a leader within the types of organizations that you now serve, mm-hmm. to being, somebody who for 2+ years at this point is supporting those businesses. Because I imagine that there are things that you have discovered were priorities for you, or that at this point are not, as you're serving, and vice versa. I'll give you an example of what I mean, because we see this all the time. I've been a business owner. I've owned franchises and things like that, and I had a big focus on lead generation. But I never thought about things like upsell or cross sell, or how to extract referrals from my client base. And so when I would go and talk to a marketer, all I would talk to them about was get me more leads. I'm
Mhm.
curious about what shifts you've seen from your perspective.
It's, every business is unique, and I learn as I do every single digital marketing project and e-commerce implementation. So there is a lot of testing, measuring, pivoting, but I still will come back to old methods to try them again at points, because old tricks sometimes do work. So I'll give you an example. This is not typically, seen as digital marketing, but direct mail.
Hmm.
And direct mail has starting to make a resurgence. I don't know about you, but I get so many fewer pieces of
Yeah.
mail where we can actually, for a very low cost, get people's attention, and it's highly attributable back to the marketing source, so we know where the revenue comes from. So it's I'd say it's unique by business. I build custom roadmaps for each of my customers, and I base that roadmap on their specific business and what I've learned from running my digital marketing playbooks for 15 years. And I usually have a pretty good idea of what's going to work.
Hmm.
We focus on marketing channels that are the least noisy. Email is super noisy right now. Google Ads can't get any more noisy than that. So we end up spending most of our time on techniques like direct mail, like ringless voicemail, like automated SMS messages, like LinkedIn automation. SEO is a tried and true winner that stands the test of time. And then we avoid, like just sending out one-off marketing emails.
Yeah.
They just get buried. And we for B2B, we've seen very limited success with paid search.
Hmm.
The exception to that is shopping, Google and Bing shopping. We see that as a winner. That's stable. But trying to put ads, display ads, text ads, that's really, really expensive and tough to win that game. So we don't end up spending a lot of time playing in that field, although we do support it as a service.
And how about just because you brought it up, some form of remarketing or staying in front of people after they've been to a site?
That's a good question. We do a lot of marketing automation.
Hmm.
So no matter what type of top of the funnel activities we're doing, once we get them in the funnel, we're constantly remarketing to them via email is usually our best chance. But we build these lead gen funnels that have marketing automation that automatically trigger the SMS, or automatically trigger a ringless voicemail, or populate a salesman's dashboard so they know they need to pick up the phone and why. So we kind of couple all those together to nurture or to reactivate or to drive, a prospect into being a lead.
So, thinking about the way that a lot of the types of businesses that you work with operate, they have the initial client acquisition and then the retention of the clients.
Mhm.
How much do you play a role in the latter?
Quite a bit. I mean, it's much easier for me to drive in revenue increases with the existing customer base.
Hmm.
And so we will set up programs where we, you know, build out a CRM, build out a marketing automation platform, segment the customers, and we automate the segmentation based on their activity. So if they start going dormant, they automatically get triggered into a new automated campaign. If they become dormant, they're in a different workflow of emails and SMS and ringless voicemails and all the same, and direct mail for that
Hmm.
matter. All of that can be automated. Um, so yeah, I mean It's kind of how it works.
One of the things that I will often see, and I alluded to this earlier, is a focus from business owners and even marketing teams within businesses about always looking for new. But it sounds like that's not necessarily the conversation that you're having with your clients, which is refreshing.
We, yeah, no, I mean, we are having both of those conversations. And the conversations are starting with, let's get your house in order. Let's do all the internal things to get the right features and functionality, to get the employees motivated, to get your current customers educated. Then once we have all that set, now let's start driving new traffic. Let's do that by getting your products into marketplaces, for
Mhm.
example. We load and manage our customers' products in places like Amazon Business, Walmart's marketplace, eBay. We get our customers' products into comparison shopping engines.
Hmm.
We build out affiliate programs and bring on a a huge sales team that are only getting paid a rev share when they bring a transaction. So there's a lot of options of where we go to bring in incremental revenue. And then once we have those people in the fold, then we automate, all of the retargeting, the community, it could be through Google Ads retargeting or through email, SMS, as all the things I mentioned.
So I'm curious. You made a transition at some point from really doing the active, technical work into more of a leadership role and managing e-commerce. What interested you about shifting into that direction? And obviously now you're very much focused in organizational leadership overall, being a CEO of this and a brand new activity, business that you've started as well.
I did start hands-on, and I felt like in order for me to my end goal was management and leadership, because I knew I can get more done than being an individual contributor. But I did start as one of the first web developers. I actually my programming day started when I was a kid, writing GW Basic and running bulletin board systems, which I'm going to guess most of your listeners will have
I,
no
I was
idea.
going to ask for
Yeah,
clarification on what
yeah,
those things are, but since they're mostly obsolete, I don't think we need
yes,
to go there.
yeah. I'd say the most interesting was the bulletin board system, where that was pre-website, pre-web, and this is where I had some software running at my house. People would dial up, connect to the software, be able to download files, chat, news groups. So it's like pre-website, and from there I started building websites. And I think it was my second job. I was a consultant, kind of moved into a senior role, and then just started picking up more management responsibilities, knowing that, deep down, I'm an entrepreneur. I want to build things, and needing to, be in a leadership role so that I could utilize, a group of people's talents to all focus on a common task was definitely the secret sauce of me, climbing the career ladder
And,
and being successful.
and so March of 2020, you started Main Event Digital, and
Yeah,
March of 2022, you started yet another project.
I did. Yeah. So I purchased an electric vehicle, a Tesla Model 3, and quickly realized that in my garage I had an issue where I had this cable on the ground. And I live near Chicago. My garage floor is far from being clean, in all the snow and sludge. And so the cable would get dirty. And then every time I wanted to unplug the cable from the car, I need to reel it back up. I mean, I'm touching the cable. My hands are filthy. It just ended up being a mess. And I went out and looked for a solution, and I couldn't find an option. So I created a new company, and I'm manufacturing a product called EV Hover, EVHOVER.com. And what it is, it's an adjustable swivel arm for any electric vehicle cable, where you take it from the wall, you plug in your electric vehicle cable, or it comes from a charging station you have, and it then strings up on this arm that folds back up to the wall or extends out, and you can then easily on a little holster pull off the receiver and plug it right into your vehicle, unplug it when you're done, hang it, and just shove this thing up against the wall. So we created a prototype. I have one in my garage, and I just fell in love with it. It makes my life so much easier, and we started selling it. We sold out of our first 100 within a couple weeks, and now we are taking we're just collecting names before we start orders again while we're building up inventory.
Now,
So
what I've noticed from the site, and I'm curious about this because you have this B2B background, that this is a direct to consumer offer. So tell me a little bit about why you chose that direction.
I couldn't find a product, so I did it for my own need.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I have not really had much direct to consumer marketing experience, there's a lot of crossover. And even as a B2B seller, we've been selling to anyone that comes in off the street. That was one thing when I started in B2B. You needed to have an account set up by a sales rep.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was behind basically a firewall. I changed that model with all of my customers. And I said, listen, if someone, if there's a business and they need a product and they don't have an account with us and they've never spoken to us, they don't have a salesman, and they want to just get an order in and they'll pay list price, well, let's take that order. We don't need to give them discounted pricing.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that direct to consumer. It's mostly selling to other businesses or DIY or hobbyists. So I had some exposure on how to do that, but so far we are taking advantage of the influencers. Actually, they've driven most of the activity. We have YouTube influencers, we have TikTok, and the YouTubers are just kicking ass. They're driving a lot of activity.
That's awesome to hear, and I want to dive deeper into that. Perhaps we're gonna have you back, maybe a year into that project to see what you discovered over the course of that year. But for now, we got to leave it, and we want to make sure that folks know where they can find out more about Main Event.
Sure.
So,
well, they can go to maineventdigital.com. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of us, and from there we are pretty present on all the social media platforms. So you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it. And that would be, if you want to get a hold of me directly, my LinkedIn is a good way to do that. And that is just linkedin.com/in/e-commerce exec is my vanity URL. You can get directly to me.
Oh, I love that. Well, we will leave links to all of those, including the EV Hover. And I really, really thank you for making some time to chat with us and guide us through some of your background and your perspective on B2B e-commerce. So, Mike Baer, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, David. I really appreciate it.
Indeed. Folks, this has been More Perfect Marketing. If you know somebody who could benefit from listening to this episode, please pass it along. And if you have some feedback for us, we certainly appreciate hearing from you. A great way to offer your feedback is via Apple Podcasts. Hope to see you back here again on another episode soon. Take care.